So let's just talk a little bit about like why did you want to go pre-med? What about med school was attractive to you, and just what that process has been like?
It's a very interesting story. I always tell this to my students, but so I came in, I picked my major off of Google, right?
Mm,
Like physiology, pre-med wasn't even my first choice. It was computer science because on Google, that was the most popular major. And I
yep.
didn't know what I wanted to do. My mom was like, if you get good grades and you push yourself, you can be anything you want. You can get into any school you want. Guys, UCSD. And I'm like, now what? Well, shoot,
Yeah.
that's all we got, bro. Like, we got to figure
Figure it
this
out from
out.
here.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, let me sign up for computer science. It was impacted. My backup was physiology neuro. I'm like, okay, like I like biology. I like physiology. Doing my pre-med major, getting involved with like, volunteering, going on little excursions like Ecuador, doing all the stuff that you're supposed to do as a pre-med, right? By the time my second year ended, I was just finishing, or not even finishing, still getting through retaking like OChem, physics, and I'm just like, nah, this ain't it. Nah, I don't like science enough to just try to be like go into like
Right.
medicine, and that's when I try to transition to ethnic studies. And my goal at ethnic studies was to be like a teacher, to be a counselor, to be like working higher ed. Came to my senior year, so I kept my pre-med major because I'm like, I didn't do all these crazy classes to not finish the major. So I finished the major still. But my senior year, I had an ethnic studies year-long class and had this dope teacher, Black woman, and she's like, come to my office. Everyone has to pick a research topic. So she's like, all right, Cameron, like, what are you trying to research? And I'm like, I'm not really like sure yet. Probably something in like healthcare, because
Hmm.
I was pre-med, so I kind of want to see what's ethnic studies in that room.
Yeah.
She's like, well, before we talk about that, like, you're going to like med school or nursing school or something? And I'm like, nah. She's like, oh, did you drop your major? I'm like, no, I'm finishing the major. She's like, so you're finishing the major and you're not going to go into like medicine? I'm like, no. She's like, how come? I'm like, it's not really for me. She's like, that's fine, but why? I'm like, just, I don't know. She's like, well, we can sit here until you give me an answer because I'm not going to accept that. And I literally didn't have an answer for her. And she was like, well, there you go. There's a research question. Go figure out why more
Mm.
Black students aren't trying to go to medicine. Like, y'all there's so many Black pre-med medicine, like med student or pre-med students here on campus, and hardly any of y'all go into medicine.
Mm.
So go figure that out. That question like changed my life, bro.
I
So
love
that
that.
whole senior year, like, this is when I start learning about the other side of medicine, the socioeconomic side, the representation side, the lack of access and disparities and all this type of stuff, which is a whole bunch of stuff that I never knew about. I had like great healthcare like growing up. I never had to worry about my doctor. I was cool with my doctor. When I'm thinking back, I'm like, I had a Black doctor. Like, no
Mm.
wonder, like, I didn't ever have to think about this stuff. And I'm like learning about all this crazy stuff that go on in the world and how lack of Black doctors there are. I'm talking to like other students, sending out surveys, like, yo, like we was all pre-med. Like, why isn't only like three of us that are still thinking like medicine? And just hearing like all the stereotype that like, oh, like just all the different reasons that Black people had to think about aside from just following their passion. There's just like too many barriers. Like I worked in the med school side of campus. Me and the custodians was the only Black people over there.
Mm.
You know, I'm like, there's a whole pharmacy and med school here, and me and the custodians the only Black people. Like that gets into your mind without you thinking about it. I did a whole
Yeah.
like internship in a hospital and Palomar Health for 1.5 years. One single shift in 1.5 years did I see a Black doctor.
Wow.
And I worked at three different hospitals. Like you don't think about it, but it really like messes with you. So I'm like, okay, like now that I understand all these insecurities, now that I actually like finding something interesting in medicine, like, okay, like now I actually feel like I have a purpose. I don't just like this topic because before I'm like, yeah, I like the topic, but it just don't seem like enough to just like it to go into it because med school is crazy. But once I kind of found that passion and I found my purpose, and I'm like, oh snap, I can do this. Like,
Yeah.
I should do this. Like, let me be real with myself. Would I want to be a doctor? And I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't letting myself think that until I kind of got over. And I wouldn't even say got over. Like, these are still insecurities I have, but at least not let them stop me from pursuing my passion. And yeah, ironically, ethnic studies brought me back to medicine. And then I graduated and I was like, all right, I'm gonna take some gap years and try to figure this
Mm-hmm.
thing out. And I graduated because I went to South Africa for study abroad. I finished that end of 2017. So I came back beginning of 2018 and I was working at Wahupa Upward Bound, working with students. And I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
well, I still want to do something I'm interested in. So I still got to work with students for 2.5 years. And then 2020, end of summer, that's when I started med school. And now I'm in halfway through my third year.
You doing
So
it,
it's
man.
crazy, bro. Yeah.
You doing it. I'm so proud of you, dog. Like, I think that's part of the reason and one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the podcast, really for that exact answer you just gave, because I know what it's like, especially working in missions and seeing so many students who are like, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be so and so, and just thinking about like how few role models there are out there of like
Mhm.
black men being in these specific fields, black women, black trans people being in these specific fields. And I think it's so important to share and hear stories about how people navigated that and to validate some of those feelings. So I think especially working with students now, sometimes like, yeah, like I don't know what to do. I don't know who to talk to. And I'm like, hey, like I have a friend who's in med school. Like, do you want to go talk to my friend who's in med school? Because even though they're not the doctor owning their own practice yet, they could talk to you about what that experience is like and validate some of those
Mhm.
feelings. So yeah, man, I know throughout the last couple of years, we've both been in grad schools, professional schools, and whatnot.
Mhm.
So we send those text messages like, "Hey, bro, you stressed?" Like, "Yeah, I'm stressed too."
Dude,
But we,
grad school grides, bro.